you're able to shift into an identity that you couldn't otherwise do without it feeling like you were trampling on yourself. We're incorporating a part of ourself that was pre-trauma. We're incorporating a part of ourself that we actually had. Are you practicing shadow work? And in specific, Teal Swan's completion process, when you try to take action, you still have that same limiting feeling. You're having this sense of like, oh my God, I thought I already healed this. And it keeps coming up and coming up. Then listen to the end of this video, because I'm going to show you the step that you might be missing and exactly what you can do so that it makes sense in your real life, so that you can want good things for yourself and not feel triggered by that. I'm Lauren, a healing and manifestation coach, and I'm here to help you work through past traumas and make your life the picture of your dreams. So this part of the completion process is the aspect work. And this is where we integrate a part of our consciousness that had fractured off at the time of the trauma. Teal talks about this part in terms of fragmentation, and that it's these traumatizing events that some aspect of our consciousness is disowned by us in that moment of distress. For example, let's say you were crying and you got in trouble every time you cried. Then maybe part of you had to disown that part of you that felt sad because it wasn't accepted by your parents. And it was just such an awful feeling to experience the disapproval of your family when you were in that state. You had to kind of like try to not let that happen. When you felt sad, have another thing come into play that would stop the sadness. And so just over time, it just becomes a habit of like sadness kicks in and there's this almost knee-jerk reaction inside yourself to shut it down. One of the reasons why it's hard to do aspect work is because it's so esoteric. It's so kind of like a wild card. I mean, but in my own personal experience and with other people, I have found this to be almost like the cornerstone to if you're going to have a life-changing, I don't know, inner identity or relationship to yourself and your world through the completion process or not. So the part of the completion process that you do the aspect work is right after you have come in as the adult self and you are reparenting the child you. Look at their body language and see how are they connecting to and relating to the adult you. We want you to be in that first person perspective as the child feeling something new relative to that trauma. So there was the super bad thing, the shock, but now something new. You're gaining access to what the whole spectrum of your emotional experience was, including the emotions you were trying to not feel. And so when you do that with help, which is your adult self and perhaps other support figures, you have the space to feel those emotions in and to just land inside yourself. So why is that important? This is the piece before aspect work. I'm kind of like hammering this in that we want to get a really well absorbed right before aspect work experience, because it'll make your aspect work make sense. It won't just be a cerebral exercise, which is kind of like not going to help. And then once you see that there's improvement in the child, you assume the position, the first person aspect of the child you, and you invite into the room fractured aspects of myself. It's okay to come back because we have a solution, our presence, my total presence with you and my acceptance. And then you wait. Look out in the room for maybe a translucent or a light being or a sort of ghosty, wispy-like being that might be small, streams of light, but it could just appear as an actual baby or person. When the aspects come, it's important to take on the perspective of the child, because the child is the one who's going to be integrating them. It's going to feel as if she's integrating them into her body, through her heart, her throat, top of her head. Allow the scene to play itself out on its own. The whole feeling of the completion process is this in general. We're wanting to let our subconscious play out, almost like a daydream. And what we're wanting to not do is think through logically, oh, what should an aspect look like? What we're going into is our subconscious and some parts of our memory. That's what we know we're doing. So we want to let our subconscious play around And then we want to watch what things come up in our play. Sometimes they don't want to integrate. And sometimes they come as like a really scary, huge, big thing, or a really small, scared, little, tiny, just thing. Validate them, treat them like they're normal. Is there anything you need? And then they change, they shapeshift. Our own mind, some aspect of ourself, let's say it's permission to feel sad, we finally, from ourself, have permission to be that way. And because the judgment on ourself hurts so bad because it's so far from our most natural, pure state of being, isn't against ourself. We're not against ourself. Once that's gone and we're not against ourself, it feels really full, feels validating. And so we now feel better about ourselves. It's really that simple. Validating this part, a part of us relaxes and more of us feels like we can accept more of us. And when we can accept more of ourselves, that's when we can actually consciously start to intentionally manifest stuff. We can actually do the positive focus work. We can actually envision happy things for ourselves and not feel like we're actually kicking ourselves. If that's making any sense. What if no aspects show up? That's no problem. That just means that the step before isn't complete. So go back to offering presence to the child. Maybe you feel, as the kid, just still unseen, unsafe, and that maybe there's too much positive force on you. Maybe the support figures and the adult you is trying too hard to make you happy. And it's really not actually helping you feel okay. Land inside that emotion and have the thought, yeah, I get to feel this way. Whoa. That click has to happen because it can't just keep going. Nope, can't feel this way. Nope. And then the wall just keeps going up between the experience and the allowance to have the experience. The answer I get 9.9 times out of 10 is I feel more full. And that makes sense because we've just brought on a part of ourself that had to be shut out. It's really just a permission slip for our psyche, for that part of our psyche to be allowed back in. Subconscious is so wiggly. It's so, what's the word? Wily. It's so hard to like pin down. Right? And it's so much in our emotional body. So when we go into these play realms or go back in time and we take on the emotional qualities of that event, and we're using the CP's symbolism as a way, as a tool to access that part of our psyche. Because we start with the portal of anchoring into the emotion, into the feeling signature of that traumatic event, right? Relative to a trigger that's happening in real life. So we go from the real life trigger. When was the first time I felt that way, right? And so now you're doing the aspect work, fast forward through the process. Now you're doing the aspect work and you're like, these are some of the feelings I had also. And then this was the moment I had to reject that part of myself because it was like, it would be really dumb to keep on trying to accept, let's say, yourself for feeling sad when nobody else was. And matter of fact, you were kind of in trouble for it. So it made more sense to identify with just a happy person and to stop trying to let yourself feel that sadness that you actually keep having. That covered what aspect work is and exactly how to do it. Why aspect work is so important is because we're taking on a part of ourselves that we rejected before and we're allowing it back in. And so this is going to help us set boundaries that we can't set right now or create new dynamics in a relationship that we can't create right now. So for example, let's use that one about there's this inner permission, inner permission to have sadness. It doesn't feel comfortable. So you over positive yourself all the time. You're constantly trying to talk yourself away from when you feel bad, but not just like pure positive focus and then moving into something good, but it has a self-rejection feeling going with it. And that's why it's not help. That's why you're not able to, let's say in this example, manifest something because there's, it's not just pure positive focus. There's a knee-jerk reaction that's activating, I'm not worthy. It's, I feel bad and I have to turn my back on myself in that state. When you heal that, then you will be able to go into the pure positive focus, and it could even be with your sad self. You'd be like, yeah, I'm taking my sad self with me. But there'll be this awareness. I do think we all have this to some degree. Okay. Because parents are busy and they don't want to be bothered with their kids' negative emotion. I mean, I'm a parent and I've had that experience as well. It's really hard to get through parenting or being a kid and not either being shut up or discouraging your kid from, no, right now is not the time for you to be having an upset. I do appreciate how friggin' challenging it is to be like the kind of parent I wish I was. Another example, let's say the aspect is joy. You were super bubbly. Your parent or caregiver, for some reason, gave you work. It was just like, there's no time for that. And they just, assigned you some task. There's stress around showing bubbliness, showing joy. So now a lifetime of, or a childhood of living through trying to shut that down in yourself because of rejection from a caregiver is going to translate into an adult life of there's this knee-jerk reaction inside yourself. So we become that parent who says, no, don't feel joy. And so for me, it was the other way around. I became that parent who's like, no, don't be upset right now. I'm doing this. Like there's this little me in here, and it was like, there's this like inner one going, no, right? No, don't be that. If you've onboarded, it's going to feel like you've just absorbed that permission slip, that little joyful one back into your body. Then this is a permission to have, in this example we're using, permission to have joy, permission to experience joy, permission to be joyful. So much blossoms from that. This is the opposite of bypassing, right? You can go into a positive state without feeling like you're trampling on your negative feelings because it's not okay to feel bad. Spiritual bypassing or positive bypassing is when you feel bad, you positivize yourself at the exclusion of the bad feeling part, not just, like I said before, positiving, and that's pure positive focus, and that's different than, oh, I'm not okay to feel bad. There's a really big distinction. So, and let's say you weren't allowed to have joy before, and that's causing a ton of problems in your life. Everything seems heavy. It doesn't feel good to imagine a future for yourself that's really great. It's hard to even imagine something because there's this knee-jerk reaction that keeps happening inside your body over and over and over in your mind. It's not okay to feel good. So if it's not okay to feel good, meaning you don't get to be you if you feel good, then how are you going to imagine the person of your dreams cherishing and adoring you? Because that would feel really joyful. That would be painful to imagine. It'd be like, it's never going to happen, and I don't get to have that, so why torture myself? And so that becomes a habit. Not being able to have sadness is just as bad. Because that means you can't protect yourself from bad things. Like, oh, this feels bad, so what? And I don't get to actually feel bad. It's like over positiving every horrible situation. That's so bad. I'm laughing because that's my life. Because we're taking these two extreme examples, no permission to feel sad and no permission to feel happy. Part of you knows, well, don't go even bothering about imagining a great future for yourself because you keep getting a bad situation because now you have actual evidence that says your life's always going to be super problematic. If you can't feel sad, then if you're with a partner who mistreats you and that makes you feel lonely because you're not connecting anymore, you're going to not blame the situation you're in, but you're going to say you're going to just be like, oh, it's because I'm too sad. It's because I feel too bad. You're not going to look at reality and say, oh, it's because this relationship isn't working. So be like, no, I need to fix myself. If you can't feel happy, you're going to be like, well, why, like what I said before, like, why even envision the future? Why even like torment myself with that? And then your future is going to be just like a lot of seriousness and manifesting a lot of serious people and just a lot of stress trying to keep yourself from going into bubbliness. life gets really serious. You get good grades. You like maybe even make a shit ton of money. And maybe you're not happy. Because you're not supposed to be happy. Happiness doesn't mean you're a good person. Happiness means you're a bad person. According to that traumatic experience or series of traumatic experiences. Is this making sense? I hope this is making sense. Like, I know what I mean. So the aspect that you onboarded or aspects are now part of your consciousness. They make up your personality. They make up your psyche. Now you can act in your life also from this part. And they can work with the rest of you. It'll always feel strong. You ask yourself, how do I feel different than I felt before? Where's this aspect in my body? What do they want to eat? How would they want me to dress? You have to nurture them. Think of this. You just got a new part of your consciousness onboarded that's finally has permission to be. But don't forget, the other part the rest of you is like, not used to it, right? You're not used to it. You're not used to this. You're still going to have the knee-jerk reaction. And you're still going to want to kick them out the door. So your job at this point, our job at this point, is to notice when we're kicking them out the door. That's the most important thing. The most important thing is not to suddenly try to become more joyful or suddenly try to allow yourself to be sad. Consciously start to notice. Be right back in some kind of situation where that happens and you go, oh. And it might be the first time you've actually caught yourself. Why can you catch yourself now? Because the aspect is there helping you. Because you have the aspect. You have the part of you, your consciousness. There's an acceptance now from the rest of you that says, that has experienced, even for a flash, it has experienced it's okay to be this way. That was long enough to break the loop. The loop of I feel happy, it's not okay. I feel happy, it's not okay. I feel happy, and it broke. It broke for a moment. And that was just enough. It was like a window of opportunity where your spirit got to go, phew, and you got to like align and feel yourself as your whole self. I get to have joy, or I get to be sad. I'm just using those two examples. There's like a ton of other ones. I get to be courageous. I get to be scared. You might be incorporating scared parts that need to know it's okay to have fear. And know what's your job is to actually protect them, show them, gently guide them through the thing. I'm going to do this thing and bulldoze and like, even though I have the fear. A lot of people do that and that works great for a lot of people. But in my own personal experience, that doesn't work. And working with traumatized people, that doesn't work either. You want to actually be like, oh, there's this part of me that has fear, but now I know how to be my higher self. I can actually take care of them and be like, look, okay, we'll just do a little bit. How about we just do a little bit? Maybe you're trying to work on your business and you're like, no. You're like, okay, we'll just do 20 minutes and then we're done. We're gonna have a snack. It's like that. When you notice, you switch out of being consumed by being that the part that doesn't want to be happy. And then you notice, hey, I'm like that. Whoa, yeah, I'm not letting myself. This is that. This is me saying, no, I don't get to have joy. Oh yeah, but I did incorporate that aspect of myself. So I know that there's part of me who once was okay with joy. So now we're getting into why this isn't bypassing, because you are, and this is the most probably important part of the whole video. This is the most important part of aspect work, of why it works to help us manifest, is because you're able to shift into an identity that you couldn't otherwise do without it feeling like you were trampling on yourself. We're incorporating a part of ourself that was pre-trauma. We're incorporating a part of ourself that we actually had before the event. Remember, this part of our consciousness, so-called fragmented at the time of the event. And that's proof that we once had them. So all the way up until then, that was part of our personality. If you take away one thing from this video, this is the one thing. The identity that we can now safely, non-bypassingly relate to and live from, we already were. We're just remembering that that's part of us. It's a member of ourself, of our personality or our psyche. This is so important because when you're triggered, we take on the state of ourselves from that traumatized perspective and we become it fully. When you've done aspect work, you get to anchor into that part of your personality that you already have. So it won't feel like, when you think about going into a positive vision of your life and then you just get a yucky feeling, you feel stopped and blocked. That's why. It's because that part of your identity is still rejected. The aspect of you that you onboarded during your completion process is going to give you more power to create, is going to give you more presence with who you are. It's going to give you more self-acceptance. And so you're able to look at life and live life through that aspect of yourself that you already used to. You already used to do that. It's not new. You're like going back to how you actually were before the trauma. I hope that makes sense. Because one of the biggest problems with positive focus and trauma is that there's a knee-jerk reaction to visualizing something good. And this will solve that problem. This will solve that problem. This will help you be in the perspective of I get to have joy, or I even get to have sadness, and that be okay. Therefore, I get to set boundaries. So, because if you can't have sadness, then you're gonna always try to over positive yourself and please people, and you will have a lack of boundaries, and that will be quite unsafe. So not being able to be sad is actually quite dangerous, and not being able to be happy is quite miserable. Connect into that part of yourself. What if right now that part had more permission to be, and you can breathe into that part and give them oxygen and give them space? What would they want? What would that part want to eat? How would that part want to dress? And so you want to start to practice living from this part of you. Remember, this is part of you that you already own. It's not a new thing. You had this before the trauma. You're just, kind of, it's like if you had a toy that was in a closet for 30 years and it was always yours, or a bike, let's say, and you just realize you have this bike in the closet. You get to take it out. You get to ride it everywhere you want to go. It's yours now. You just forgot that you had it in the shed, right? Keep remembering that is part of my consciousness. So start taking action as soon as you can on their behalf. And often that's going to come in the form of setting a boundary. What boundary would you now be able to set with the security inside you that it's okay? Now, for me, I was living in a group sort of setting, and I literally put a curtain in part of the house. Life changed after that damn curtain went up. So what's your curtain? It could be taking down a curtain for you. There could be too many walls, and you're like, no, I want more connection, and I want to work on this. How to incorporate your aspect work into your real life. Asking how that you feel differently than you did before. Noticing when you're triggered and when that old part of you kicks in and you're not allowing yourself to incorporate that aspect, just noticing it, and then helping that part to do something to make you feel better. How could that part actually help you feel better if you were to set some kind of boundary? How could that being part of your personality now help you get that done? You have more of yourself now, remember. So now you can. And it's not bypassing because you're just remembering that this was part of yourself. You've flipped on the switch, you've opened the shed door, and you now see that sparkly bike. Now you get to ride it. It's not a new bike. Stay magical.